Hey, welcome back to the One Life Podcast, where we talk about things for One Life Church, but ultimately things we think can relate to you in your one and only life. My name is Sarah Inman. I'm one of the co-hosts of the podcast, and what you're about to hear is part 2 of a conversation we had with Carolyn Edwards talking about grief. And if you haven't had a chance to listen to part 1, go back and listen to part 1. Had some great conversation with Carolyn there, learning from the experiences that she's had as a counselor in grief, as a chaplain at a local hospital, and just someone who has spent time with a lot of people, and someone that we learn from immensely. The part 2 of the conversation, we're talking a little bit more about how does this lead us towards God, and then also we end out the episode with Carolyn giving some resources, which you can find in the show notes. Just find a link there. You can go find all these typed out that Carolyn put together. And also we have resources right now for our series called Restore, Rebuilding the Broken Soul here at One Life Church. If you go to onelifechurch.org/restore to find some books, some podcasts, other podcasts, to find some websites, apps, and things that will help you, that we think will help you just kind of process some restoration tools to help you out right now in this season of life. And so we're going to jump right back in and listen and learn from Carolyn right now. So kind of shifting a little bit of the conversation, we talked a little bit about this. How does grieving kind of point us to God? Because I think that there's times where like we can, even see, we talked about the Psalms a little bit before we started, of like crying out to God, and sometimes in grief, and sometimes that's the only place left to go. Like, have you seen moments of that, or any experiences with that?
I think anything in life is an opportunity, to seek God. So it could be in any pain that we have or any good thing. So it is an did you say opportunity, or wait, reword that for me?
I think she said opportunity.
Okay.
Didn't you?
Opportunity of, well, yeah. I mean, how does it kind of direct us or lead us, towards?
First of all, we need to remember that the Holy Spirit lives in us, and so he feels everything that we feel. So when we're grieving, God feels all of the pain that we are feeling. Every single thing, everything that we're thinking, the Holy Spirit's there experiencing it. And, then the Trinity is experiencing it with us. So to realize that there's someone that knows us so deeply in the place of such great pain, and walks alongside us and gets it. Because God really, a lot of times we think he's far away, but really, he can read our minds. So he's right there and can feel what we're feeling more than we can feel ourselves. So it can be very intimate in just, being with God. I think a lot of people do seek God, and a lot of people can run away. So it's a choice, like in anything else in life, where when we have something painful, we can either choose to move forward in the pain, in a deeper relationship, or we can run away and hide in some way or avoid in some way. I do feel that as far as grief, I think of Isaiah 53, where, it talks about the suffering servant, that he is acquainted with grief. And I also think God has been grieving, all the time since he created human beings, because, we've been turning away from him, for all of human history. And I even this morning I thought, this might sound really wild and you might have to take this out, but he even grieved the loss of Satan, because Satan was, what was his first grief? It could have been when the angels fell and he lost, there was broken relationship with the angels, with the fallen angels. And so there has been grief, even though, as the Trinity, we think that the Trinity meets the needs of each other and doesn't need anyone else. I do feel like God has always grieved.
Yeah.
And even like in Isaiah 53, they were predicting, the Trinity, wrote that. And they were anticipating what Jesus would go through. That he would be separated from the Father, 700 years earlier. And so, they were experiencing anticipatory grief. So I think, God understands grief more than we do, really, into a greater depth.
I mean, especially if we think of if we're created in the image of God, and this is something that I 100%, I mean, One Life has been integral in me understanding this. When we've gone through the Psalms, we've done that multiple summers, and knowing and reading them, not in this monotone voice, but in the emotion that they're written.
Yes.
If we're created with emotions, of course, that's one of them. I mean, and if we're talking about grief being a part of our emotions and the way that we feel and process things, that makes sense to me.
Yes.
The thing that's helped me with it is grief is the price of love, as it were. I mean,
absolutely.
The greater the love, the deeper the grief.
Well,
it's just that simple when you
Yes.
lose it. And so that's just how it goes. So if God is love, there is going to be, that's one of my favorite passages, man acquainted with grief and familiar with suffering. It's, but that's the beauty of it. I think it's one of the most profound things in all the universe. I think the God of the universe is acquainted with that. And so that can be a bridge to articulating that, pouring out your soul and doing it the way the psalmists do. I mean, this feels horrible, and then just kind of giving it all out, facing him rather than running away.
Yes.
That is the connection. I don't know how you'd survive without it, actually.
Yes. And really with the Psalms, what I think are so great, it's not just the content of the Psalms, it's the fact that God allowed it to be part of the Bible.
Oh, yeah.
Like this emotional mess of emotions he chose, that's 150 chapters long.
Yeah.
The longest book of the
one,
Bible. That's just a mess. And he decided that needed to be in Scripture. And so to me, that is him giving us permission to be honest and to be expressive. Even when it feels really ugly and, in grief to so many people, it's just, they feel so, they think, am I going crazy? What's wrong with me? Grief is not pretty, and it's just awful. And God is giving people permission to express all of that.
Yeah, and even poetic expression that goes beyond your own. You don't even know what you're feeling, but he gives you words that you can.
Yes.
I quoted it. I think it was at the beginning of this series. Was one of my favorite lines in all the Bible is at the end of Psalm 88. The darkness is my closest friend.
Yes.
The end.
Yes.
And it's like, wow,
yes.
what a great line to end with, and it's just sitting there. It's
yes.
like, I didn't know you could say that.
Yes.
This guy did. And
yes.
It's written down, breathed out by God. So.
As we talk about maybe even restoration, and this idea of that we're trying to focus on, and I think we've already hopefully given people who are trying to connect with someone who's grieving. What about somebody who's listening here right now and maybe just in the midst of grief and saw the title of this and thought, maybe I'll listen to it, maybe it'll help. What would you say for them to do? And maybe it's not even grief. And I think even maybe a second part of this question, what can all of us be doing as we all are grieving this past year? Things, losses. We started out with a lament of this series of talking about very practical things. Obviously, the major things of death that has happened. We know people have lost loved ones, but then even things that seem small to some people, but like a senior not being able to have graduation or prom, or not being able to go to your house, for groups like that. I miss that, like those are things that we grieve. How do we process through that?
Well, first of all, I would say, don't isolate. So try to, even though many people will want to isolate when they're grieving, try not to. Try to be around people. And try to communicate with people what you need or what you don't need. Because, again, as we've talked about, people are anxious about grief, about grieving people. And sometimes they need help. And so even though it's really hard and a lot of times people want to crawl into a hole and, just crawl under a blanket, try not to, try to be with other people. So that is one thing. And one thing people will learn is who is safe and who's not. So you're looking for safe people. And that's, across the board.
Sure.
Because, there's some people you cannot share with. And, don't do it. Look for a few people that are safe, that will not try to make you feel better or try to correct you, but that, will just listen. I think it's also good to develop relationships with people that have gone through the same thing. So if there is a loss of a spouse, to have conversations with other people that have lost spouses, because, they're the only ones that are going to understand. So I would strongly recommend to join a support group. And there's, there are a lot of different churches that offer Grief Share. And I would strongly recommend that. Hospice, also, every hospice, there's like maybe 5 or 6 companies in town. And, they're supposed to be offering support also that's open to the public. They have support groups. So to call the local hospices to find out, like we had 3 different groups when I was there, and they were all open to the public. So to find out about a group and try to have a couple different people that are safe that you can talk to. It is important to talk about it. And I think that's whatever anybody's been feeling, in this last year, to have, it is, don't hole up or don't, just quench it down. Don't deny it, but try to have somebody that you can talk things through with, whatever it is that you're experiencing. So those are some things. You can do some reading. Reading is very, very helpful. So I would recommend that as well. But, just try to be with people, and, and just know, people just need help to know how to help you.
Yeah. Well, hey, it's that simple, but it's that complicated because we don't do that oftentimes.
Yeah.
This is how you can help me.
Yeah. But we can, for those of us that are trying to come alongside, we can say, how can I help you?
Sure.
So, if we need help too, but to be honest and say, okay, this is awkward. This is difficult. So how can we do this together?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have 2 more questions.
Oh.
But
Okay.
I want to make sure before we get there, because they transition a little bit. Anything else that we haven't covered that you just want to make sure that we talk about?
I do want to just bring up, I am going to just run through a list.
Please.
Because a lot of people, have read or heard of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she's the one that wrote about 5 stages of grief. And so people think, okay, there's 5 stages of grief, and then I'm better. But, there's a lot more than 5 stages. She was kind of like the person that like brought up that whole concept. Mm-hmm. And so, what we learned from her is really important. But I just want to say that there are more stages of grief, and they don't go in any order. And a lot of times you can be angry and depressed at the same time, or you might be stuck in anger, for 2 years. At that point, if after 2 years, you need to go to counseling. I would recommend that. That's when you're stuck. Sure. So I just want to mention a couple things here. Yeah. Even like everybody feels denial or shock at first. And I just really want to, people can't concentrate. They don't remember things. They get in accidents. They fall down stairs because they can't concentrate. And a lot of times people are dealing with, the details of, after a person's died. I know that you've had to deal with that a lot. So how much there is. Yes. And it's very, very hard to concentrate. So I like my brother. He did the house payment 3 times, because he wasn't able to concentrate. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah. He just couldn't think. Hopefully he won't listen to this, but people have a hard time concentrating. So you need to be really careful at first. cautious, when you're walking downstairs, or about tripping, about your driving, and just realize you're going to be numb. And the numbness actually can last several months. And it can last longer. I know a man that it lasted 4 years.
4
and then
years.
He called for grief support at hospice, yeah. So you never know how long it's going to last. We know about anger. Another is anxiety. A lot of people have a lot of anxiety, panic attacks when they're grieving. Might be shaky, just can't pull themselves together. So that is often, one of the things that they feel. The guilt and regret, loneliness, the physical symptoms, the depression. I do have to say that a lot of people think I'll never forget like what they look like when they died, but they actually, memories do get better. Memories do improve, but at first, some of the memories are really, really awful. And in one of the support groups, we decided we did not like the word acceptance because nobody wants to accept the loss of a loved one.
Yeah. So
we called it adjustment
Yeah.
to a new reality.
I like that.
So those are just, some of the things. But, this stuff is messy. And I just want to encourage people not to say, what is wrong with me? Why can't I pull myself together? Just know this is what grief is like. And it is not easy. It is the hardest thing human beings go through. And it's just going to be that way. But if you just can't embrace it and kind of go with it, you actually will be better off in the long run. So even when you feel like I am in a rut, I can't move forward, unless it's a couple years out. But don't analyze yourself. Don't judge yourself. Again, respect your feelings.
Well, I think something that's helped me is to think in terms of you don't get over it, you just go through it.
Yes.
And that's important because I think it's something that would always be there. Imagine losing a child or someone like that.
Yes.
I remember, I will never forget, I was standing in the lobby with a woman who was in her 80s, and she related to me that she had lost a child. She had lost a baby. She stood there and cried right there in the lobby.
Yes.
Remembering that,
Yes.
this is decades before this. So,
Yes.
and so she got through it. Her life went on. You would have never known. I mean, she was a bright, cheery, good humored person, but that she's been carrying that the whole time. And
Yes.
and she doesn't want to forget. She doesn't want to get over it in the sense that sometimes we think she has adjusted.
Yes.
And it's just a part of her story at this point.
Yes. Yes.
That's good. And you shared some poems as well.
Yes.
Do you want to read any of them?
Sure. Yeah.
I like
You
this.
shared poems? Did you? Did I overlook that?
They're in the
We had
little
poetry?
They're in the here.
packet I gave you.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't look that deep into it. I didn't.
okay.
Oops. I didn't know there was poetry there.
Yeah.
I don't think we've ever done poetry on the
Woohoo.
podcast.
It's not
The first one?
It's not poetry that I wrote.
Oh,
It's-
okay.
It's poetry I recommend.
Oh, okay. All right.
And I do recommend The Grumpy Monkey too.
And that was
This book.
one of my questions because I wanted to make sure we talked about it because it's on the table.
Okay, we will. Okay, so here are two. These are great poems. Probably it would be great for people to have just for anyone that's in pain. So let me just start with I need to be heard. I need to be heard. Please don't tell me how you feel. I need to be heard. Please don't try to comfort me by telling me you'll be better in time. I need to be heard. Please don't pacify me by trying to top it with a hurt of your own. I need to be heard. Please don't look away when I mention that precious name. I need to be heard. Can't there be anger among sadness and misery? I need to be heard. Meet me where I am and listen to me until I don't need to be heard anymore.
That's good.
And then listening as healing. Oh, that poem, I Need to Be Heard, is by Leslie Delp. Listening as healing. When I need you to listen to me and you start giving advice, you have not given me what I needed. When I need you to listen to me and you begin to tell me why I shouldn't feel that way, you are telling me to deny my feelings. When I need you to listen to me and you feel you have to do something to solve my problems, you have failed me, strange as that may seem. Listen. All I ask is that you listen, not talk or do, just hear me. You're trying to cure me, not hear me. But when you accept as simple fact that I do feel what I feel, no matter how irrational that may seem to you, then I can quit trying to convince you and get about the business of understanding what's behind my feelings. And when that's clear, the answers sometimes are obvious. And you know what? It was your listening that made that possible. Perhaps that's why prayer works sometimes for some people, because God is still and doesn't give advice or try to fix things. God just listens so you can work it out yourself, staying with you as a silent partner. So please listen and hear me, and we can both keep in mind that there are important times in our lives when we just need to be heard, not cured. And that is anonymous.
Wow.
Yeah, if we just did those two poems in our lives,
it's a good place to start.
Yes.
Again, I'm going to put this resource, this information in the show notes, and then I think also add a small section to onelifechurch.org/restore. We have a list of resources there that we've been putting out, some books, podcasts. Yeah, we recommend other podcasts too, and some websites, some things. Our staff went through some of that today, so this is good. Do you want to talk about Grumpy Monkey before we close out?
Yes. Okay, I can't read the whole Grumpy Monkey and you can't see the pictures. But what I love about Grumpy Monkey is...
It's a book.
It's a book.
Yeah.
It's a children's book by Suzanne Lang. And this monkey wakes up and he's very grumpy. And no matter, that it's a beautiful day and everything's great in the world, but he's grumpy. And so all of these different animals try to make him feel better. And, they'll tell him to do certain things like, he'll say, I'm not grumpy. And somebody will say, but look at how you're standing. And Norman the ape says, you're all hunched. So Jim, straightened up. So he did all the things that people were telling him to do. And all the different animals are giving him advice. And he finally just... tries to look happy, but he can't because he's still grumpy. So he finally just stomps away by himself because none of them helped him. They all had their own solution that seemed good to them, but none of those helped him. So he finally admitted when he was by himself that he said, I guess I'm grumpy. And then he just started to feel really sad. And then he came upon Norman the ape, and Norman was all slumped, and he was frowning. And Jim, the little monkey, says, what's the matter? And he said, I danced with porcupine. So he has all these porcupines, sticking out of his bottom. And Jim says, are you okay? And Norman says, it hurts, but I'll probably feel better soon enough. Are you still grumpy? Asked Norman. And Jim says, yes, but I'll probably feel better soon enough too. But for now, I need to be grumpy. And Norman, the big ape, says, it's a wonderful day to be grumpy. And Jim agreed. And they just sat together. And he already felt a little bit better. So he just needed to be with somebody that wouldn't try to make him feel better. And they just needed to be together.
So that's kind of the simplest, I guess, practical takeaway. You said it's just a lot of listening and just being.
Yes.
If that's one thing, I'm going to steal Brett's question from our last episode of if there's one thing you could give people when it comes to grieving, would that be it?
Yes.
Listening and just being.
And be courageous.
Be courageous.
I mean, seek the person and then listen.
This is good. All right. One last question. This is not one I put on the list. We're talking about restoration here and kind of spiritual practice, restorative practices for us. What are some of those for Carolyn?
What's restorative for me? Sitting out on my sun porch, looking in my backyard, and watching the birds. And one of the things I just love so much is just seeing the variety of different birds and hearing the different bird calls and just seeing how creative God is, and, that he did not have to be so generous with us. And so just being out there helps me, connect with him. So that's one of the things I would say that I do, to restore is, for me, I am an introvert, surprisingly. And so just being by myself, but outside or near outside, and just being quiet is, what's restorative for me.
That's great.
We have on our app, and we keep telling people this, on our website, we have resources that people can kind of search up, and our staff went through. There is what's it actually called? It's an assessment of some sort. If it was,
I can look it up while you're talking.
It's like your spiritual pathways assessment.
Yeah.
And we all took it, and it kind of just gives you a little guide on what would be restorative for you. It just help you understand that. And I think most of us had what's called nature or natural or something like that, what you expressed, whether it's hiking or whatever. So we all decided we have to go on a trip together, and we have to go start having our meetings in the mountains or something. But it's good to know that about yourself and be able to name it and know that does it, and make sure it gets in your life. It's very important.
Yeah. And for me, I actually need to be by myself.
Yeah.
And so, and I am, a person that avoids by being busy. I avoid God by being busy. So for me to, sit still, be still and know that he is God is pretty much what it all comes down to.
That's good. Carolyn, thanks for making time. Thanks for coming on and sharing on this. I love this conversation. Kind of came up a little bit randomly. You and I were just talking. You're like, I'd love to talk about grief. I'm like, okay, let's do it. And I'm glad we got to do this. It's good. I appreciate the information, and I hope everybody else, if there's questions or things you want to even ask more, send us an email, podcast@onelifechurch.org. And we'd love to be able to continue to have conversations. Again, send some resources your way. You can find the resources of things that we talked about with Carolyn in the show notes. And again, on our resources section, onelifechurch.org/restore. You can see some of the messages, some of the previous podcast episodes we've been doing as well. But anything to close with, Brett?
Well, we are going to continue this conversation, and I hope everybody's taking advantage of it, because we do need, after the year we've had, we need to be proactive about this and lean into it. And so that's the objective, and we're going to even extend it beyond Easter, I think, as well, and look at the resources, listen to this stuff, and go after it, because we all need it.
Yeah.
Our next episode, actually, I usually don't have all this information together, but we're kind of prepped right now. We're going to be talking about connection to people and relationships, and talking about that as what that looks like in restoration. So I'm excited about that episode. Carolyn, thanks again.
Thank you.
Yeah.